Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of many videos that will comprise my completionist playthrough of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I decided that it would be rather redundant to do the entire Thief series again. I might still do that, but I've decided that because this is going to take so long to do, it shouldn't be a main project, it should be a side project, and I've kind of hit a wall in BioShock Infinite. I need to do some more practice runs on the Hall of Heroes before I actually record a video and subject you to my struggles therein in 1999 mode. So, Skyrim. As you know, it's a massive, sprawling, open-world game, and a completionist playthrough of it is a rather daunting task, but I've spent some time on the UESP wiki, and I have compiled what I think are the necessary conditions to really say you've done everything in Skyrim. And I've got my notes here, and I'll tell you what all we're going to do by the end of this playthrough. We will have learned every single property of every single alchemical ingredient. We will have read every book, every note, and every letter in the game. We will be at level 252, which is the minimum necessary to unlock every perk. We will have every dragon shout. We will have learned every possible enchantment. We will have... I have a list of the free skill boosts where somebody teaches you something or you get a skill point for reading a book. I'm not going to stop myself from leveling a skill in order to take advantage of the free boosts, but whether they end up doing me any good or not, I'm going to make sure we find all the free skill boosts. I have a list of everything that I need to top out my desired endgame gear, all of the crafting materials I need, and probably the hardest part of making this list is I also have everything that I ever need to turn into somebody for a quest, and the biggest portion of all, everything I need to completely build and furnish all 3 houses in the Hearthfire expansion, including one of each of the 9 possible add-ons in each of the 3 houses. So, we're going to get all of that. We're going to discover every location, and we're going to clear every location that's capable of being cleared. We're going to complete every single quest. If we're stopped from doing so by a glitch, I am willing to use the console to fix glitches, but, well, I'll get to that later. We're going to complete every quest, and we're going to do our best not to let bugs and glitches stop us. We're going to learn every spell in the game, and we're going to collect every unique item and every artifact in the game. So as you can see, it's going to take a long time. That's why it's a side project. I'll probably do 5 or 6 regular Let's Plays before this one even dreams of being finished. So let's talk about my style. I'm going to play on Adept, and the reason is I don't mind the handicap that raising the difficulty creates, but the issue is that the handicap isn't programmed too well in that it screws up your skill progression. Skills like destruction magic are based on partially on the amount of damage you do, and the handicap that you get from raising the difficulty makes it darn near impossible to raise the destruction skill. Similarly, your armor skills and your block skill progress based on how much damage you absorb. And so if you can only take 1 or 2 hits at a time, the absorbed damage is minimal, and it takes half of forever to level those skills. So, I'm going to play on Adept until I'm finished leveling, and then I will probably go ahead and bump the difficulty up to Legendary, simply because once you finish leveling, playing on Adept is just ridiculously easy. I have all 3 expansions. We will complete all 3 expansions: Dawnguard, Hearthfire, and Dragonborn. I'm playing vanilla. I have no mods at all. I do have the official high-res texture packs installed, but other than that and the official expansions and the official patches, that's it. I argued with myself for a while over whether to include the unofficial Skyrim patch, but I decided against it, namely because I want my Let's Play to behave the same for anybody who might be on a console. Speaking of using the console, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to do everything as legitimately as possible. The only thing that I might use the console for is to fix a bug wherever I might run into one. And if that happens, you know, I'll be open about it. I'll let you see me doing it. And, you know, that would be something that's supposed to spawn in a level not being there. I'll use the console to spawn it in. But that's it. That's the maximum extent to which I'll use the console. And finally, regarding progression, I'm not going to grind. Not exactly. I guess it'll seem a little grind-ish in places, because if I get into a fight and my armor skills aren't leveled yet, I'll probably take a minute and let it hit me a few times just to get some armor progression. But what I won't do is, you know, run away and heal and come back and grind it all the way to 100 on one enemy. That would be insane. Similarly, I'm not going to do anything with the exploit that's available in Unbound, where you can just wail on Hadvar or Rayloff and max all your combat skills. I'm not going to do any of that, but I am in what I view as, I guess, semi-natural progression. I'm going to try to naturally progress my skills as fast as I can, so until sneak is maxed out, I'm going to be sneaking all the time. Until lockpicking is maxed out, I'm going to pick every lock possible, even if I can pickpocket the key, and I'm going to break lockpicks. And every time I come to town, I'm going to do a little crafting session just to boost the crafting skills, that kind of thing. I don't think it should end up being terribly tedious. As far as looting goes, I'm going to pretty much be a hoarder. That's kind of how I do. Which is a little bit silly, I know, but I can't resist. And plus, you get to sell those things for your speech skill. So, I think that covers all of the preliminaries. Let's do Unbound. That'll be the first video, the tutorial. And the scrolls have foretold of black wings in the cold, that when brothers wage war come unfurled. Alduin, bane of kings, ancient shadow unbound, with a hunger to swallow the world. Nords are 50% resistant to cold damage, and they can use Battle Cry to make their enemies flee for a short time. Bethesda Game Studios presents The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim.
Hey, you. You're finally awake. You were trying to cross the border, right? Walked right into that Imperial ambush, same as us. And that thief over there.
Damn you Stormcloaks. Skyrim was fine until you came along. Empire was nice and lazy. If they hadn't been looking for you, could have stolen that horse and been halfway to Hammerfell. You there, you and me, we shouldn't be here. It's these Stormcloaks the Empire wants.
We're all brothers and sisters in Vines now, thief.
Shut up back there.
What's wrong with him, huh?
Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King.
Ulfric? The Jarl of Windhelm? You're the leader of the rebellion. But if they've captured you... Oh gods, where are they taking us?
I don't know where we're going, but Sovngarde awaits.
No, this can't be happening. This isn't happening.
Hey, what village are you from, horse thief?
Why do you care?
A Nord's last thoughts should be of home.
Rorikstead. I'm from Rorikstead.
General Tullius, sir. The headsman is waiting.
Good. Let's get this over with.
Sure. Mara, Debella, Kinnarev, Akatosh, Divines, please help me.
Look at him. General Tullius, the military governor. And it looks like the Dalmor are with him. Damn elves. I bet they had something to do with this. This is Helgen. I used to be sweet on a girl from here. Wonder if Vilod is still making that mead with juniper berries mixed in. Funny. When I was a boy, imperial walls and towers used to make me feel so safe.
Who are they, Daddy? Where are they going?
To go inside.
Why? I want to watch the soldiers.
Inside the house. Now.
Whoa!
Yes, Papa.
Get these prisoners out of the carts. Move it!
Why are we stopping?
Why do you think? End of the line. Let's go. Shouldn't keep the gods waiting for us.
No, wait! We're not rebels!
Face your death with some courage, thief.
You've got to tell them! We weren't with you! This is a mistake!
Step towards the block when we call your name. One at a time.
Empire loves their damn lists.
Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm.
It has been an honor, Jarl Ulfric.
Ralof of Riverwood. Lokir of Rorikstead.
No! I'm not a rebel! You can't do this!
Halt!
You're not gonna kill me!
Archers! Anyone else feel like running?
Wait. You there. Step forward. Who are you?
Alright. Well, I prefer to play a Nord in Skyrim for the same reason I preferred to play a Dark Elf in Morrowind. It feels right to be the race whose province you're in. Plus, the 50% frost resist is extremely helpful. So, I'm gonna go with a Nord. Of course, you can be any of these others. Argonian, Breton, Dark Elf, High Elf, Imperial, Khajiit, Orc, Redguard, and Wood Elf. The flavor text here doesn't really tell you much about them, but this reptilian race, well suited for the treacherous swamps of their Black Marsh homeland, has developed a natural resistance to diseases and the ability to breathe underwater. They can call upon the hist skin to regenerate health very quickly. Useful power, but it's kind of stupid to choose a race based on their power, because you can only use a power once every 24 hours. However, water breathing is minimally useful. There are really only a couple of dungeons where you have to swim underwater. And disease resistance, diseases are not a big deal. You can cure them for free in any town with a religious shrine, and if you become a werewolf, then or a vampire, you get disease immunity that way too. So I think Argonians are kind of useless. Bretons, in addition to their quick and perceptive grasp of spellcraft, even the humblest of High Rock's Bretons can boast a resistance to magic. Bretons can call upon the Dragonskin power to absorb spells. Again, I don't really care about powers. Magic resist is very good. I'd be very tempted to take either a Breton, a Dark Elf, or a Nord because of their intrinsic resists. Nord wins out amongst those three just for storyline reasons. But Bretons are very good. You would do fine to take that race. Dark Elf. Also known as Dunmer in their homeland of Morrowind, Dark Elves are noted for their stealth and magic skills. They are naturally resistant to fire and can call upon their ancestors' wrath to surround themselves in fire. Once again, don't care about powers, but intrinsic fire resist is very useful. I think frost resist is probably a little bit more useful, with the exception of fighting dragons. Then the fire resist becomes incredibly handy, but a lot of enemies use frost magic, particularly the Draugr, who you fight legions and legions of. So I think intrinsic frost resist is probably a little bit more useful, but there's nothing wrong with Dark Elf. It's a great race to choose. High Elf. Also known as Altmer in their homeland of Somerset Isle, the High Elves are the most strongly gifted in the arcane arts of all the races. They can call upon their highborn power to regenerate magicka quickly. Again, don't really care about powers, and there's not really that much useful about High Elves. Like in older games, they got a magicka bonus, which was useful, although it was typically offset by a magic weakness. High Elves have never been that useful in my mind, and that certainly continues in this game. Imperial. Natives of Cyrodiil, they have proved to be shrewd diplomats and traders. They are skilled with combat and magic. Anywhere gold coins might be found, Imperials always seem to find a few more. They can call upon the voice of the Emperor to calm an enemy. Finding more gold is useless. I mean, in the very early game, you might be running low on gold, but by the time we're all the way through, we will have purchased everything we could possibly need and be drowning in it regardless. Imperials are useless. Khajiit. Hailing from the province of Elsewhere, they are intelligent, quick, and agile. They make excellent thieves due to their natural stealthiness. All Khajiit can see in the dark at will and have unarmed claw attacks. Now, if you play with lighting mods, Night Eye becomes a lot more useful, but for vanilla Skyrim purposes, you can always see pretty well, so Night Eye doesn't do you that much good. Unarmed, they're the only race. Well, Argonians get a little boost to it too, but it's useful when you brawl, and that's about it. Weapons are so much better. Now, if you've seen the Robaz video on how to be an unarmed badass Viking, you can, of course, engineer a playthrough that works pretty well with unarmed, and there are several Punchcat playthroughs documented on the internet, which are a lot of fun, for sure, but so if you want to do that, feel free, but in terms of actual benefit relative to the other races, extra unarmed damage doesn't really do much good. Nord. Citizens of Skyrim, they are a tall and fair-haired people. Strong and hardy, Nords are famous for their resistance to cold and their talent as warriors. They can use a battle cry to make opponents flee. Again, intrinsic frost resist is probably the most commonly useful, because so many Draugr use frost magic, and half of the dragons use frost breath. So Nords are a great choice anyway, and I think they fit in really well with the storyline. Orc. The people of the Rothgarian and Dragontail Mountains, Orcish smiths are prized for their craftsmanship. Orc troops in heavy armor are among the finest in the Empire, and are fearsome when using their berserker rage. Now, I said that powers are kind of useless because you can only use them once a day, and that's true, but I will say that berserker rage is probably the best power. While it's active, you do double damage and you take half damage, and you can just mow something down extremely quickly while that power's active. So if you want to use it on the boss of a dungeon, or you're having trouble with a dragon, that can be very useful. Redguard. The most naturally talented warriors in Tamriel, the Redguards of Hammerfell, have a hardy constitution and a natural resistance to poison. They can call upon an adrenaline rush in combat. Again, resistance to poison is just, it's not nearly as good as magic, fire, or frost. Redguards are pretty good, and Adrenaline Rush is great as far as powers go, because as long as it's active, you can do infinite power attacks, because no matter how much a power attack costs, as long as you have at least 1 stamina, you'll be able to do it. So that's also extremely useful for taking something down quickly that might otherwise be giving you trouble, but I would still recommend one of the other 3, Breton, Dark Elf, or Nord, depending on your preference. And finally, Wood Elf. The clan folk of the western Valenwood forests, also known as Bosmer. Wood Elves make good scouts and thieves, and there are no finer archers in all of Tamriel. They have natural resistances to both poisons and diseases. They can command animals to fight for them. A fairly useless power and fairly useless intrinsic ability, so unless you have really good personal or aesthetic reasons for wanting a Bosmer, I find them to be pretty low on the totem pole as far as races go. So, let's grab a Nord. I won't waste much time making him look right. I'll go with one of the 10 presets. I think I like the basic one the best. So we'll go with that. Finish and name your character, yes. I'll just give him my name.
You picked a bad time to come home to Skyrim, Kinsman. Captain, what should we do? He's not on the list.
Forget the list. He goes to the block.
By your orders, Captain. I'm sorry. At least you'll die here, in your homeland. Follow the captain, prisoner.
Ulfric Stormcloak. Some here in Helgen call you a hero, but a hero doesn't use a power like the voice to murder his king and usurp his throne. You started this war, plunged Skyrim into chaos, and now the Empire is going to put you down and restore the peace.
What was it?
It's nothing. Carry on.
Yes, General Tullius. Give them their last rites.
As we commend your souls to Aetherius, blessings of the 8 divines upon
For the love of Talos, shut up and let's get this over with.
Learn our... As you wish.
Come on! I haven't got all morning. My ancestors are smiling at me, Imperials. And you say the same.
You Imperial bastards!
Justice!
Death to the Stormcloaks!
As fearless in death as he was in life.
Next, the Nord and the Rags.
Here it is again. Did you hear that?
I said, next prisoner.
To the block, prisoner. Nice and easy.
What in oblivion is that?
Sentries, what do you see?
It's in the clouds!
Dragon!
Don't get Get the back people to safety!
Hey, Kinsman, you hear that? Come on, the dogs won't give us another chance.
Started. Unbound. Make your way to the keep. Alright. Quest Journal. The Quest Journal lists your quests and objectives. Select Quest and press E to make it the active quest, which adds its quest target to your compass and world map. Unbound. One cool little detail that I only noticed recently is that you can tell what kind of quest it is by the symbol around the quest title. These dragon heads are the main quest. Unbound. I have been captured by the Empire and sentenced to death alongside the Stormcloak rebels. We were taken to Helgen, but before I could be executed, a dragon appeared and attacked the town. I need to find some way to escape. Yes, I suppose you do.
Jarl, look. What is that thing? Could the legends be true?
Legends don't burn down villages.
We need to move, now! Up through the tower. Let's go!
Another
Up the
second.
stairs. Move!
We just need to move some of these. Get back!
This is all pretty straightforward.
See the inn on the other side? Jump through the roof and keep going. Go! We'll follow when we can.
As much as I'd like to hoard all that stuff, your hands are bound right now and you can't pick anything up.
Now! Nada, boy. You're doing great. Everyone get back! Still alive, prisoner? Keep close to me if you want to stay that way. Gunnar, take care of the boy. I have to find General Tullius and join the defense.
Although we can start sneaking. I'm gonna do that. Get used to this. I'm pretty much just gonna stay in stealth mode until sneak hits 100.
Quickly, follow me! It's you and me, prisoner. Stay close.
We got Fusro Dodd.
Nothing kills it! Keep your eyes on it! Nothing kills it!
Raylo, you damn traitor! Out of my way!
We're escaping, Hadvar. You're not stopping us this time.
Fine. I hope that dragon takes you all to Sovereign Guard.
Okay, so now you have a fairly minor choice to make. Enter the keep with Hadvar or Ralof. This is a sort of prelude to deciding whether to side with the Imperial Legion or the Stormcloaks in the Civil War, but it has absolutely no bearing on which side you're ultimately able to join. Regardless of which guy you follow, you can still freely choose sides. So what are the differences? If you follow Hadvar, you end up fighting Stormcloaks, and you can only get light armor while you're traveling through the dungeon. If you side with Ralof, you end up fighting Legionnaires, and you can get both heavy and light armor, but you can only get one-handed weapons. For some reason, the Imperials never have two-handed weapons, and the Stormcloaks do. So, it really doesn't matter in long-term either, because as soon as you get out of the dungeon, really, if you followed Hadvar, then you can get heavy armor immediately by killing a bandit. And you can get a two-handed weapon the same way if you followed Ralof. So that doesn't make the decision for you either. Of course, there's just which guy you'd rather follow story-wise, which for me is probably Ralof, but the one thing that does make a difference is when you get to Riverwood, they both have family there, and you immediately become friends with the family, either with Hod and Girder for following Ralof, or with Alvor and Sigrid for following Hadvar. I'm going to follow Hadvar because there's no other way to make friends with Alvor and Sigrid. When I get to Riverwood, if I follow Hadvar, I'm friends with Alvor and Sigrid, so I can take things from their house, and I can just chop wood at the lumber mill to make friends with Hod and Girder. If I follow Ralof, I'm automatically friends with Hod and Girder. I can chop wood, but it doesn't change anything. But there's no way to become friends with Alvor and Sigrid. So, ultimately, I think it's more beneficial to follow Hadvar, regardless of whether you ultimately intend to side with the Stormcloaks. So, that's what I'm going to do.
With me, prisoner. Let's go. Come on. We need to get it. Looks like we're the only ones who made it. Was that really a dragon? To bring us of the end times?
Escape Helgen.
We should keep moving. Come here. Let me see if I can get those bindings off. Come on, you need your hands free. There you go. Take a look around. There should be plenty of gear to choose from. I'm going to see if I can find something for these bones.
Alright. Now, I have a couple of notes here. If you do have the patience to grind and grind and grind, there's an exploit you can take advantage of here during the tutorial. Following Hadvar, there are two places you can use it. This room, and the room near the end with the bear. Hadvar will never turn hostile, and he's essential, which means you can just wail on him to train up all of your combat skills, if you so desire. So right now, with no equipment, all I can do is sneak attack him to raise sneak, which actually doesn't take that long and is pretty useful. And if you really have a ton of patience, you can cast flames to raise destruction. As long as you stay away from the chest, you can grab an iron sword off the wall and also raise one-handed. So you can walk out of this room with 3 skills maxed out if you have a ton of patience. I'm not going to do that, but it seems dark. Oh, and it was. I have a glitch in my game where sometimes it automatically darkens it to 0 brightness, even if I have it set at the default, but as soon as I adjust it, it suddenly kicks in to wherever I actually had it set. So, there are a few things to do in this room, but let's see what we're carrying first of all. World map. On the world map, locations that you have discovered have light icons, while locations that you have only heard about have dark icons. You can select any location you have discovered to fast travel to it. So we're on the local map of Helgen Keep right now, but we can zoom out to the world map. The only location we've found so far is Helgen, and our map shows in dark the 9 hold capitals: Solitude, Morthal, Dawnstar, Winterhold, Windhelm. Way down in the southeast is Riften, Whiterun, Falkreath, and Markarth. So there those are. If we look at magic, every player starts the game with flames, a gout of fire that does 8 points per second. Targets on fire take extra damage. Level novice, cost 13 per second. Restoration, healing. Every player also starts with this spell. Heals the caster 10 points per second. Level novice, cost 11 per second. And your racial power will be here. So I'm a Nord, so I have Battle Cry. Targets flee for 30 seconds. And active effects. This is where you can see your intrinsic abilities. My Nord, Resist Frost. Your Nord blood gives you 50% resistance to frost. Pretty cool. Let's see what we start out with. I picked up this iron sword, which is 8 damage, weighs 9, value 25. Start with a foot wrap and a rough spun tunic. Now, believe it or not, I'm going to hoard this rough spun tunic because eventually in my little crafting cycle, and I don't use the restoration loop, I don't break it, I operate within the limits Bethesda programmed, but this becomes part of my crafting cycle to get my endgame gear. I figure just keep the first thing you find that'll work, and the rough spun tunic works, so I'll hold on to it. But neither of these are worth any armor. They're both worth 1 gold and weigh 1 pound each. Alright. Now let's go to skills. Now I'll talk more about this as I level up, but my top priority is to get my crafting skills maxed out. All 3 of them, enchanting, smithing, and alchemy. My endgame goal is to use dragon bone weapons and dragon scale armor, since I do have Dawnguard installed. And as far as weapon types, I like to go sword and board with a sword and shield, enchanted of course, and I also like to carry a bow around, so ultimately we'll take a lot of perks in archery, light armor, and one-handed, and block. The magic resistance perks and alteration are definitely worthwhile, so we'll be taking those. Just to make my weapons do even more damage, I'm going to enchant them with fire magic, so later on I'll get augmented flames, but it's not a high priority. In restoration, I do like to get just regeneration for emergencies, and respite's a good perk to have just so I can hit healing for 1 point and immediately be able to do another power attack because of the way stamina works, which is pretty cool. But that's also low priority. Magic resistance is high priority. That's very useful. But as with everything, it comes below crafting. Won't be taking anything in heavy armor until the very end when I'm just doing legendary leveling and getting every perk just because. Same thing with two-handed. Sneak. Now Sneak has some very good perks that enable you to do a lot of damage, but they're fairly low priority for me. But ultimately I do plan on getting up to deadly aim on the right side and up to silence on the left side. Shadow Warrior is pretty useful actually, but you typically don't need it if you have 100 sneak and you have silence and you're just a little bit careful in dealing with your opponents. Lockpicking, not worth it at all. It can be convenient, so like getting unbreakable and never breaking lockpicks just makes picking locks a lot more convenient. So when I get to after I have everything I actually want, I'll probably do lockpicking second just for convenience sake, but it's very low priority. Pickpocket, this is silly, but I rush to extra pockets just because I hate being over encumbered and I'm such a pack rat, it always happens. But as far as the rest of the tree, I do eventually like to have perfect touch, but again, low priority, so low that it'll be in the legendary levels above 81. Speech. This will probably be the first convenience tree I start to fill in. Namely, I like to get merchant and I like to get fence. Once you get fence in particular, you can sell everything to everybody. And that's just a huge boost in convenience. And Master Trader is also good just because by the time I'm up in those levels, I will routinely have items that are worth more gold than any merchant is carrying, and this makes that a little less painful. But again, low priority. Alchemy, high priority, top priority in fact. Illusion, very low. This in fact will be the very last tree I perk out because it's the most useful for legendary leveling. We'll cross that bridge more when we get to it, but ultimately I like to create armor that reduces casting costs to 0. And once you have the master level illusion spell Harmony, you can gain levels incredibly fast by standing in a crowded place and casting Harmony over and over again. So once we're level 81 and once I have all my gear, I'll probably sit there for a while until I get to the College of Winterhold and get the master level illusion magic, and then I can very quickly, in less than 30 minutes, you can go from level 81 to level 252 just spamming Harmony, and filling out the rest of your perk points and getting extra stamina for extra carry weight. Conjuration, it's actually very powerful if you want to play that way. I don't particularly like it. I'm more a fan of sneaking around and shooting something in the neck or running up and smashing it to death with a sword. But I won't lie, but I'd be lying if I said Conjuration wasn't incredibly powerful and very useful. Probably an absolute necessity if you want to play a mage, because destruction is useless at high levels. And that about covers it. So I'll talk more about prioritizing as I actually start to get perk points, but top priority, crafting skills, enchanting, smithing, alchemy. Next level down are getting to magic resist and alteration, block, light armor, archery, and one-handed. And then another level down from that are my convenience stuff that I really do want. So a little bit in destruction, a little bit in restoration, a little bit in pickpocket, and then that'll pretty much get us to level 81. And then I'll start prioritizing the stuff I don't really care about. When I start legendary leveling, I'll probably do sneak or speech first, then lockpicking, then pickpocket, then whatever. So that about covers that, although I should actually read the flavor text for the skills, I suppose. Destruction. As a Nord, I start with 15. The School of Destruction involves the harnessing of the energies of fire, frost, and shock. This skill makes it easier to cast spells like Fireball, Ice Spike, and Lightning Bolt. Of course, you start with 100 each, Magicka, Health, and Stamina, at level 1. Restoration, 15. The School of Restoration involves control over life forces. This skill makes it easier to cast spells like Healing, Turn Undead, and Magical Wards. Alteration, 15. The School of Alteration involves the manipulation of the physical world and its natural properties. This skill makes it easier to cast spells like Water Breathing, Magical Protection, and Paralysis. Enchanting, 15. The more powerful the enchanter, the stronger the magic he can bind to his weapons and armor. Actually, I guess I should go ahead and look at available perks, too. Novice Destruction. Can cast novice-level destruction spells for half Magicka. Augmented Flames, 2 levels. Fire spells do 25% more damage. Requires 30 destruction. Intense Flames. Fire damage causes targets to flee if their health is low. Requires 50. Augmented Frost, 2 levels. Frost spells do 25% more damage. Requires 30. Deep Freeze. Frost damage paralyzes targets if their health is low. Requires 60. So ultimately, I guess I'll just specify which perks I'm planning on taking. I will take Novice Destruction as a prereq and Augmented Flames 1 and 2 as part of my level 81 build. And that's it for Destruction. So let's look at the others. Augmented Shock, 2 levels. Shock spells do 25% more damage, requires 30. Disintegrate. Shock damage disintegrates targets if their health is low, requires 70. Apprentice Destruction. Cast apprentice-level destruction spells for half Magicka, requires 25. Adept Destruction. Cast adept-level destruction spells for half Magicka, requires 50. Expert Destruction. Cast expert-level destruction spells for half Magicka, requires 75. Master Destruction. Cast master-level destruction spells for half Magicka, requires 100. This branch exists in all 5 magic trees, and it's utterly useless because you can enchant casting costs down to 0. Rune Master can place runes 5 times farther away, requires 40. Destruction Dual Casting. Dual casting a destruction spell overcharges the effect into an even more powerful version, requires 20. Impact. Most destruction spells will stagger an opponent when dual cast, requires 40. Restoration. Novice Restoration. Cast novice-level restoration spells for half Magicka. Respite. I will take this, eventually. Healing spells also restore stamina. Requires 40. Eventually I'll have every perk. If I say I'm going to take it, I mean that as part of my pre-legendary level 81 build. I will take Respite, but it's low priority. Regeneration. Healing spells cure 50% more, requires 20. I will also take Regeneration, but that'll be it for the Restoration tree. Necromage. All spells are more effective against undead, requires 70. Ward Absorb. Wards recharge your Magicka when hit with spells, requires 60. That's dumb, you should just enchant magic resistance. Or take the Atronach perk in the Alteration tree. Don't bother with wards. Apprentice Restoration. Cast apprentice-level restoration spells for half Magicka, requires 25. Adept Restoration. Cast adept-level restoration spells for half Magicka, requires 50. Expert Restoration. Cast expert-level restoration spells for half Magicka, requires 75. Master Restoration. Cast master-level restoration spells for half Magicka, requires 100. Now, here's a useful one that I'm not taking, but nonetheless useful. Recovery. Well, until you enchant things down to 0 casting cost, anyway. Recovery, 2 levels. Magicka regenerates 25% faster, requires 30. Avoid death. Once a day, heals 250 points automatically if you fall below 10% health, requires 90. And, of course, Restoration Dual Casting. Dual casting a restoration spell overcharges the effects into an even more powerful version, requires 20. Now, before I go further, let's talk quickly about attributes. I'm never going to touch Magicka for reasons I've already said. You can enchant casting costs down to 0, making it useless. You need a good health pool and you need a good stamina pool. Health just for surviving, and stamina because power attacks are awesome, sprinting is awesome, and carrying capacity is awesome. So I tend to raise my health to 500 as fast as possible before touching anything else. Then I raise stamina to 300. I think that's a pretty good base stamina pool. And then I spend the rest of my points on health until I get to 700. Once I'm at about 700 health, you're pretty invincible on Adept. And so I start raising stamina until it too hits 700. And then after I raise by then you're in the realm of legendary levels, and once they're each at 700, then I kind of start just raising them 1-to-1, because they each stay useful the entire game. So that's really basically it. I'm just going to do health and stamina, and never touch Magicka. Alteration. Novice Alteration. Cast novice level alteration spells for half Magicka. Alteration Dual Casting. Dual casting an alteration spell overcharges the effects into an even more powerful version, requires 20. Apprentice Alteration. Cast apprentice level alteration spells for half Magicka, requires 25. Mage Armor, 3 levels. Protection spells like Stone Flesh are twice as strong if not wearing armor. No thanks. Adept Alteration. Cast Adept level alteration spells for half Magicka, requires 50. Stability. Alteration spells have greater duration, requires 70. No thanks. Expert Alteration. Cast Expert level alteration spells for half Magicka, requires 75. Atronach. Absorb 30% of the Magicka of any spells that hit you, requires 100. That, actually quite useful. And Master Alteration. But it's not part of my build, but it is useful. Master Alteration. Cast Master level alteration spells for half Magicka, requires 100. And here is the most important part of this tree. This is pretty high priority. Magic Resistance, 3 levels. Blocks 10% of a spell's effects, requires 30. Enchanting. Enchanter, 5 levels. New enchantments are 20% stronger. Fire Enchanter. Fire enchantments on weapons and armor are 25% stronger, requires 30. Frost Enchanter. Frost enchantments on weapons and armor are 25% stronger, requires 40. Storm Enchanter. Shock enchantments on weapons and armor are 25% stronger, requires 50. Insightful Enchanter. Skill enchantments on armor are 25% stronger, requires 50. Corpus Enchanter. Health, Magicka, and Stamina enchantments on armor are 25% stronger, requires 70. I'm going to get Insightful and all 3 elements. I'm not going to get Corpus, but I am going to get Extra Effect. Can put 2 enchantments on the same item, requires 100. That's incredibly important. Sorry. Soul Squeezer. Soul Gems provide extra Magicka for recharging, requires 20. Soul Siphon. Death blows to creatures but not people trap 5% of the victim's soul, recharging the weapon, requires 40. That's mildly useful. It spares you the need to carry around soul gems, but I think it's easiest just to get the Black Star and have Soul Trap be one of your 2 effects. Smithing, 20. The art of creating and improving weapons and armor from raw materials. Steelsmithing can create steel armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Now, you have a choice to make here. I guess you could go with both. If you want to smith good light armor, you go up the left side of the tree. If you want to smith good heavy armor, or if you want to smith heavy armor, you go up the right side of the tree. Now, you run into a problem because until you get to the top of the circle, the weapons on the right side are definitely better, even though I like light armor better than heavy. So despite the fact that I prefer light armor, I'm going to go up the right side of the tree. So let's look at the left, which I'm ignoring. Elven smithing. Can create elven armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 30. Advanced armors. Can create scaled and plate armor at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 50. Glassmithing. Can create glass armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 70. Arcane blacksmith here in the middle is something I will take. You can improve magical weapons and armor. Requires 60. Means that I can enchant something and not worry about never being able to smith it again, which is pretty important. Dwarven smithing. Can create dwarven armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 30. Orcish smithing. Can create orcish armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 50. Ebony smithing. Can create ebony armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 80. Daedric smithing. Can create Daedric armor and weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 90. And dragon armor. Can create dragon armor and dragonbone weapons at forges and improve them twice as much. Requires 100. Now, an interesting note about light versus heavy. You can get to dragon armor either way, and dragon scale is the best light armor in the game, and dragonbone weapons are the best weapons, so you miss nothing regarding light armor if you go up the left side of the tree. However, dragon plate is not the best heavy armor in the game. Daedric is better armor than dragon plate is. So if you want the absolute best heavy armor, you have to go up the right side of the tree, and you don't lose out on the best light armor by doing so. Let's move over. Heavy armor, 15. Those trained to use heavy armor make more effective use of iron, steel, dwarven, orcish, ebony, and daedric armors. Perks. Juggernaut, 5 levels. Increases armor rating for heavy armor by 20%. Fists of Steel. This is a perk you need if you're doing a punch cat or an unarmed Viking badass. Unarmed attacks with heavy armor gauntlets do their armor rating and extra damage. Requires 30. Cushioned. Half damage from falling if wearing all heavy armor. Head, chest, hands, feet. Absolutely useless. Who takes fall damage? But you have to have it as a prereq for the highly necessary conditioning. Heavy armor weighs nothing and doesn't slow you down when worn. Requires 70. Again, the choice between heavy and light armor is mainly aesthetic. I mean, there are a few things I like better about light armor, which is why I choose it, and I'll talk about those when I get to that tree. But if you want to do heavy armor, more power to you. You'll definitely want cushioned if you do. Well fitted. 25% armor bonus if wearing all heavy armor. Head, chest, hands, feet. Tower of Strength. 50% less stagger when wearing only heavy armor. Requires 50. Matching set. Additional 25% armor bonus if wearing a matched set of heavy armor. Requires 70. And Reflect Blows. 10% chance to reflect melee damage back to the enemy while wearing all heavy armor. Head, chest, hands, feet. Requires 100. I should also note that this blue background covers illusion, conjuration, destruction, restoration, alteration, and enchanting. Those are the magic skills governed by the mage stone. You can see the big blue mage back there. Starting at smithing, we're in warrior territory, where we will be all the way through archery. So now let's look at block. 20. The art of blocking an enemy's blows with a shield or weapon. Blocking reduces the damage and staggering from physical attacks. Shield Wall, 5 levels. Blocking is 20% more effective. Now I'm going to take the entire left side of the block tree. Deflect arrows. Arrows that hit the shield do no damage. Requires 30. Elemental Protection. This is a good one. Blocking with a shield reduces incoming fire, frost, and shock damage by 50%. Requires 50. Great for fighting dragons. Same with the next one. Block Runner. Able to move faster with a shield raised. Requires 70. Getting up to Block Runner is high priority. And finally, Shield Charge is one of the most overpowered perks in the game. Sprinting with a shield raised knocks down most targets. Requires 100. Shield Charge is awesome, and we're gonna get it. Quick Reflexes. Time slows down if you are blocking during an enemy's power attack. Requires 30. Pretty useful in its own way, but it has some glitches associated with it, so I tend to avoid it. Power Bash. I don't bother with the bashing perks. But Power Bash. Able to do a Power Bash. Requires 30. Deadly Bash. Bashing does 5 times more damage, requires 50. Disarming Bash. Chance to disarm when power bashing, requires 70. Two-handed. I don't use two-handed weapons. They swing too slow. I prefer to use a one-handed sword, not a dagger. Daggers are just, I don't know, they're a little too weak for me. I like swords. Two-handed weapons are just too slow, and you don't get to use a shield. But some people like them. So let's go through here. The Art of Combat, two-handed, 25. The Art of Combat using two-handed weapons, such as great swords, battle axes, and warhammers. Those trained in this skill deliver deadlier blows. Barbarian, 5 levels. Two-handed weapons do 20% more damage. Limb Splitter, 3 levels. Attacks with battle axes cause extra bleeding damage. Champion's Stance. Power attacks with two-handed weapons cost 25% less stamina, requires 20. Great Critical Charge. Can do a two-handed power attack while sprinting that does double critical damage, requires 50. Devastating Blow. Standing power attacks do 25% bonus damage with a chance to decapitate your enemies, requires 50. Sweep. Sideways power attacks with two-handed weapons hit all targets in front of you, requires 70. War Master. Backwards power attack has a 25% chance to paralyze the target, requires 100. Deep Wounds, 3 levels. Attacks with great swords have a 10% chance of doing critical damage. Skull Crusher, 3 levels. Attacks with warhammers ignore 25% of armor. Requires 30. Requires 30. One-handed. This is what I'll be using. And when I get into legendary levels, I might even drop the shield and start dual wielding. I haven't made up my mind yet. But initially, I'm just going to do sword and shield. The Art of One-handed, 20. The Art of Combat using one-handed weapons, such as daggers, swords, maces, and war axes. Those trained in this skill deliver deadlier blows. Armsman, 5 levels. One-handed weapons do 20% more damage. We'll definitely be taking all 5 levels of Armsman as fast as we can. Hack and Slash, 3 levels. Attacks with war axes cause extra bleeding damage. Fighting Stance. Power attacks with one-handed weapons cost 25% less stamina, requires 20. Not that great, but it's a prereq for Savage Strike, which I do like. Standing power attacks do 25% bonus damage with a chance to decapitate your enemies, requires 50. That'll be it, initially. Critical Charge. Can do a one-handed power attack while sprinting that does double critical damage, requires 50. And Paralyzing Strike. Backwards power attack has a 25% chance to paralyze the target. Bonebreaker, 3 levels. Attacks with maces ignore 25% of armor, requires 30. Bladesman, 3 levels, and I'll eventually get these. Attacks with swords have a 10% chance of doing critical damage, requires 30. And over here are the dual wielding perks. Dual wielding is... the mechanics are interesting. The weapon's speed is determined by the weapon in your offhand. The damage of the two weapons is added together, and you get a 15% attack speed bonus, if I remember right. The downside is that you cannot block at all. So the best thing to do is put a dagger in your offhand and a mace in your right hand, because you'll attack with the speed of the dagger, but do the damage with the mace. So Dual Flurry, 2 levels. Dual wielding attacks are 20% faster. And Dual Savagery. Dual wielding power attacks do 50% bonus damage, requires 70. That one requires 30. Archery, last warrior skill. An archer is trained in the use of bows and arrows. The greater the skill, the more deadly the shot. You pretty much have to have archery to take down dragons until you get Dragon Rend. And even besides that, archery is awesome. I end up taking almost every perk in this tree. Overdraw, 5 levels. Bows do 20% more damage. We will have all of those. Eagle Eye. Pressing block while aiming will zoom in your view. Requires 30. We'll take it. Steady Hand, 2 levels. Zooming in with a bow slows time by 25%. Requires 40. We'll have both of those. Critical Shot, 3 levels. 10% chance of a critical hit that does extra damage. Requires 30. We'll have all 3 of those. Power Shot. Arrows stagger all but the largest opponents 50% of the time. Requires 50. We will have it. Hunter's Discipline. Recover twice as many arrows from dead bodies, requires 50. Not that useful, but a prerequisite for the highly useful ranger. Able to move faster with a drawn bow, requires 60, will take it. Quick shot, can draw a bow 30% faster, requires 70. Awesome perk, taking it. Bullseye, 15% chance of paralyzing the target for a few seconds, requires 100. Not bothering. Things tend to die fast enough that paralyzing them isn't that useful for me. Now we cross into the thief skills. Light armor, sneak, lockpicking, pickpocket, speech, and alchemy are the thief skills. Let's look at light armor. Starts at 20. Those trained to use light armor make more effective use of hide, leather, elven, and glass armors. Agile defender, 5 levels. Increase armor rating for light armor by 20%. I'm only going to take 1 level of agile defender for the prerequisite. Reason being, with maxed out smithing, I can raise the armor rating to the armor rating cap, to the damage reduction cap, without any extra perks. Custom fit. 25% armor bonus if wearing all light armor. Head, chest, hands, feet requires 30. Again, just a prereq. Right side first, matching set. Additional 25% armor bonus if wearing a matched set of light armor. Requires 70. That one I don't bother with because we'll hit the cap anyway. Unhindered. This one's important. Light armor weighs nothing and doesn't slow you down when worn, requires 50. Very useful. Windwalker. Stamina regenerates 50% faster in all light armor, head, chest, hands, feet. This perk is the main reason that I like light armor better than heavy armor. That 50% stamina regen boost without having to waste any enchantments on it is huge and awesome. This is why I prefer light armor, this perk right here. And finally, deft movement. 10% chance of avoiding all damage from a melee attack while wearing all light armor, head, chest, hands, feet, requires 100. That one I do take. Sneak. Sneaking is the art of moving unseen and unheard. Highly skilled sneaks can even hide in plain sight. Stealth. You are 20% harder to detect when sneaking. 5 levels. Take 1 just for the prereq, don't need any more. Backstab. Sneak attacks with one-handed weapons now do 6 times damage. Requires 30. Crazy useful. Gonna get it. Deadly aim. Sneak attacks with bows now do 3 times damage. Requires 40. Again, awesome. Gonna get it. Assassin's blade. Sneak attacks with daggers now do a total of 15 times normal damage. I don't really like to use daggers, so I tend to not get Assassin's blade. But if you use a dagger, then by all means, it's awesome. Muffled movement. Noise from armor is reduced 50%, requires 30. Doesn't really do you much good, but it's a prereq for the good stuff. Light foot. You won't trigger pressure plates, requires 40. Useless, nobody cares about pressure plates. Silent roll. Sprinting while sneaking executes a silent forward roll, requires 50. Again, not that great, but a prereq for this badass right here. Silence. Walking and running does not affect detection, requires 70. Spares you the need for a muffle enchantment, and basically you won't be able to sneak up on much of anything before you get silence, and after you get silence, it's very easy to sneak up on almost anything. Finally, Shadow Warrior. Crouching stops combat for a moment and forces distant opponents to search for a target, requires 100. Kinda not really that useful because it assumes you're already in the middle of a fight. Like, if you're about to die, it can facilitate a getaway, but in terms of actually sneaking up on something, Shadow Warrior isn't that good. Lockpicking, 15. The art of lockpicking is used to open locked doors and containers faster and with fewer broken lockpicks. Novice locks. Novice locks are much easier to pick. Apprentice locks. Apprentice locks are much easier to pick, requires 25. Not very useful. Quick hands. Able to pick locks without being noticed, requires 40. Useless. Wax key. Automatically gives you a copy of a picked lock's key if it has one. Requires 50. Fairly useless. Adept locks. Adept locks are much easier to pick, requires 50. Not that useful. Golden touch. Find more gold in chests, requires 60. Not that useful. Treasure hunter. Now this one's kinda cool. This is the only reason you might want to take lockpicking perks early. But look, you have to get to 70 lockpicking before you can take it, and by then you're already gonna have gone through several dungeons and be a pretty high level anyway. So this perk would be useful early, but you can't really get it early. because it takes forever to raise lockpicking, because really the only way to do it is just to go through enough dungeons and pick enough locks, and by then you'll be very high level just from using your other skills. But this is a cool perk all the same. Requires 70, 50% greater chance of finding special treasure. Expert locks. Expert locks are much easier to pick, requires 75. Locksmith. Pick starts close to the lock opening position, requires 80. Good for convenience, not much else. Same with unbreakable. Lock picks never break, requires 100. And master locks. Master locks are much easier to pick, requires 100. Pickpocket. Now there's some useful stuff in here. 15. The stealthy art of picking an unsuspecting target's pockets. A skilled pickpocket is less likely to be caught and is more likely to find valuables. Light fingers, 5 levels. Pickpocketing bonus of 20%. Item weight and value reduce pickpocketing odds. Night thief. Plus 25% chance to pickpocket if the target is asleep, requires 30. I will end up going up to extra pockets. Carrying capacity is increased by 100, requires 50. Just because I'm a hoarder. Poisoned. Silently harm enemies by placing poisons in their pockets, requires 40. This one is actually really useful, particularly if you want to kill somebody without getting a bounty. Cut purse. Pickpocketing gold is 50% easier, requires 40. That's useless. Pickpocketing gold is easy anyway. Keymaster. Pickpocketing keys almost always works, requires 60. Also useless. Keys are very easy to pickpocket as is. Now these two, the top two, are pretty useful. Misdirection. Can pickpocket equipped weapons, requires 70. And Perfect Touch. Can pickpocket equipped items, requires 100. Basically means if you can manage to sneak up on a humanoid enemy, you can completely disarm them. Additionally, you can get good stuff that friendly NPCs are wearing or have equipped that you would otherwise have to murder them for. So those are pretty useful. Speech. This skill of persuasion can be used to get better prices from merchants and persuade others to do as you ask. Good for convenience, but not much else. Haggling, 5 levels. Buying and selling prices are 10% better. Bribery. Can bribe guards to ignore crimes, requires 30. Persuasion. Persuasion attempts are 30% easier, requires 50. Intimidation. Intimidation is twice as successful, requires 70. And the left side. This is the more useful side. Allure. 10% better prices with the opposite sex, requires 30. Not that useful, but Merchant. Oh, this makes your life so much easier if you can get it. Can sell any type of item to any kind of merchant, requires 50. But it only makes your life easier in terms of convenience. Having to run around to different kinds of merchants is a serious inconvenience, especially when some of them only have a minuscule amount of gold. So the convenience factor is very high here, but it is just convenient, so I don't get this until I'm in my legendary levels. Same with Investor. Can invest 500 gold with the shopkeeper to increase his available gold permanently, requires 70. Same with Fence. Can barter stolen goods with any merchant you have invested in, requires 90. But you don't actually need Fence, because you can always fence at the Thieves Guild. And Master Trader. Every merchant in the world gains 1,000 gold for bartering, requires 100. Alchemy. An alchemist can create magical potions and deadly poisons. Alchemist, 5 levels. Potions and poisons you make are 20% stronger. We need all 5. Physician. Potions you mix that restore health, magicka, or stamina are 25% more powerful. Requires 20. We need that as a prereq for Benefactor. Potions you mix with beneficial effects have an additional 25% greater magnitude. Requires 30. That's all we actually need out of the alchemy tree, but let's look at the rest of it. Poisoner. Poisons you mix are 25% more effective. Requires 30. Experimenter. 3 levels. Eating an ingredient reveals first 2 effects. Requires 50. Concentrated poison. Poisons applied to weapons last for twice as many hits. Requires 60. Green thumb. 2 ingredients are gathered from plants, requires 70. Snake blood, 50% resistance to all poisons, requires 80. And purity. All negative effects are removed from created potions, and all positive effects are removed from created poisons, requires 100. Illusion, 15. The School of Illusion. Illusions, Michael. A trick is something a whore does for money. The School of Illusion involves manipulating the mind of the enemy. This skill makes it easier to cast spells like Fear, Calm, and Invisibility. Illusion's an interesting skill tree. It's very overpowered early on, and it's virtually useless late in the game because the enemies, unless you fully perk it out, are just too strong for your spells to work on them. But Illusion's a great way to go early on. Novice Illusion. Cast Novice level Illusion spells for half magicka. Illusion Dual Casting. Dual casting an illusion spell overcharges the effects into an even more powerful version. Requires 20. Apprentice Illusion. Cast Apprentice level illusion spells for half magicka. Requires 25. Adept Illusion. Cast Adept level illusion spells for half magicka. Requires 50. Expert Illusion. Cast Expert level illusion spells for half magicka. Requires 75. And Master Illusion. Cast Master level illusion spells for half magicka. Requires 100. Now let's get into the more useful stuff. Animage. Illusion spells now work on higher level animals. Requires 20. Hypnotic Gaze. Calm spells now work on higher level opponents. Cumulative with Kindred Mage and Animage. Requires 30. Kindred Mage. All illusion spells work on higher level people. Requires 40. Aspect of Terror. Fear spells work on higher level opponents. Cumulative with Kindred Mage and Animage. Quiet Casting. All spells you cast from any school of magic are silent to others. Requires 50. If you want to be a sneaky spellcaster, this perk kicks ass. Rage. Frenzy spells work on higher level opponents. Cumulative with Kindred Mage and Animage. Requires 70. And Master of the Mind. Illusion spells work on undead, daedra, and automatons. Requires 90. So, if you want illusion to be viable endgame, you pretty much need every single perk from the right side of the tree. But, if you do that, it's pretty viable. It's a lot of fun to cast mayhem into a group of high-level Draugr and watch them slaughter each other, and then, finish off the leavings, the last man standing. And Conjuration, last skill. 15. The School of Conjuration governs raising the dead and summoning creations from oblivion. This skill makes it easier to cast these spells as well as Soul Trap and Bindings. Novice Conjuration. Cast Novice level Conjuration spells for half magicka. Conjuration Dual Casting. Requires 20. Dual casting a Conjuration spell overcharges the spell, allowing it to last longer. Summoner, 2 levels. Can summon Atronachs or raise undead twice as far away. Requires 30. Atromancy. Double duration for conjured Atronachs. Requires 40. Necromancy. Greater duration for reanimated undead. Requires 40. Elemental Potency. Conjured Atronachs are 50% more powerful. Requires 80. Dark Souls. Reanimated undead have 100 points more health. Requires 70. Twin Souls. You can have 2 Atronachs or reanimated zombies. Requires 100. Twin Souls is really good. If you want to, you can summon 2 Dremora Lords, and there you have it. Really strong. Mystic Binding. Bound weapons do more damage. Requires 20. Soul Stealer. Bound weapons cast Soul Trap on targets. Requires 30. Oblivion Binding. Bound weapons will banish summoned creatures and turn raised ones. Requires 50. Apprentice Conjuration. Cast Apprentice level Conjuration spells for half magicka. Requires 25. Adept Conjuration. Cast Adept level Conjuration spells for half magicka. Requires 50. Expert Conjuration. Cast Expert level Conjuration spells for half magicka. Requires 75. And Master Conjuration. Cast Master level Conjuration spells for half magicka. Requires 100. So, there's all the available perks. A quick recap for my eventual build. Novice Destruction, Augmented Flames 1 and 2. Novice Restoration, Respite Regeneration. Novice and Apprentice Alteration, all 3 levels of magic resistance. All 5 levels of Enchanter, Fire Enchanter, Frost Enchanter, Storm Enchanter, Insightful Enchanter, and Extra Effect. Steel Smithing, Arcane Blacksmith, Dwarven Smithing, Orcish Smithing, Ebony Smithing, Daedric Smithing, Dragon Armor. Nothing. Shield Wall 1, Deflect Arrows, Elemental Protection, Block Runner. These are all my high priority perks. Nothing. Armsman, all 5 levels. That's it for priority. As far as priority goes, Overdraw, all 5 levels, Eagle Eye, both levels of Steady Hand, Power Shot, and Quick Shot. Priority is Agile Defender, just one level, custom fit, and unhindered. Nothing here is a priority. Nothing here, nothing here, nothing here. And here my priorities are Alchemist 1 through 5, Physician, and Benefactor. Now for low priority stuff, I think I should have mentioned, Novice Destruction and Augmented Flames 1 and 2 are low priority. Novice Restoration, Respite, and Regeneration, low priority. The alterations are high, all the enchantings are high. Arcane Blacksmith is low priority, the rest is high. Up through Block Runner is high priority, then Shield Charge is low priority. Armsman 1 through 5 is high priority, and then Fighting Stance, Savage Strike, and Bladesman 1 through 3 are low priority. Over here, basically the right side is low priority. That's Critical Shot 1 through 3, Hunter's Discipline, and Ranger. Here, the stuff above Unhindered is low priority. That includes Windwalker and Deft Movement. Here, Stealth 1, Backstab, Deadly Aim, Muffled Movement, Lightfoot, Silent Roll, and Silence are all low priority. Still nothing on lockpicking. Here, Light Fingers 1, Night Thief, and Extra Pockets are low priority. Still nothing on Speech, nothing on Alchemy, nothing on Illusion, nothing on Conjuration. That will get us to level 81. Then we get into convenience perks as we do legendary skills. So, let's see what else is in this room. This chest is safe to search. Won't make Hadvar open the door. An Imperial Light Helmet. Armor 12, weight 2, value 35. Yes. Gold 8, value 1. Now, generally speaking, I'll go ahead and put on the light helmet. I'll go ahead and equip the iron sword, too. A good rule of thumb in terms of hoarding stuff to sell, and this is going to take some discipline for me, but I'm going to do it, is take something purely to sell it if it's worth at least 10 times as much as it weighs. Otherwise, you can leave it behind. But for now, just to get some starting money, I'm going to grab everything I can here in Helgen. Bucket weighs half a pound, value 1. 4 gold on the table. You can take all of it. Wooden bowl, half a pound, value 1. Oh, thanks. Yes, I would like to ready my weapon.
Got to be a sword or two in one of these chests. Look around.
Now, what else is here? Books! Mixed Unit Tactics, weighs 1, value 5. Mixed Unit Tactics in the 5 Years' War, Volume 1 by Codus Colonus. The legions could learn from the unconventional tactics used by the Khajiit in the 5 Years' War against Valenwood. I was stationed at the Sphinx Moth Legion fort on the border near Dune, and witnessed many of the northern skirmishes firsthand. The war started with the so-called Slaughter of Torval. The Khajiit claimed that the Bosmer invaded the city without provocation and killed over 1,000 citizens before being driven off by reinforcements from a nearby jungle tribe. The Bosmer claimed that the attack was in retaliation for Khajiiti bandits who were attacking wood caravans headed for Valenwood. In the spring of 3rd Era 396, the war moved closer to Fort Sphinxmoth. I was posted on lookout and saw parts of the conflict. I later spoke with both Khajiit and Bosmer who fought in the battle, and it will serve as an excellent example of how the Khajiit used a mixture of ground and tree units to win the war. The Khajiit began the fight in an unusual way, by sending tree-cutting teams of Cathay-Rot and the fearsome Senche-Rot, or Battle Cats, into the outskirts of Valenwood's forests. When word reached the Bosmer that trees were being felled, allegedly a crime in the strange Bosmeri religion, a unit of archers were dispatched from larger conflicts in the south. The Bosmer were thus goaded into splitting their forces into smaller groups. The Bosmer archers took up positions in the remaining trees, whose branches were now 20 or more feet apart, allowing some light into the forest floor. The Bosmer bent the remaining trees with their magics into small fortifications from which to fire their bows. When the tree cutters arrived the next morning, a half-dozen Khajiit fell to the Bosmer arrows in the first volley. After that, the Khajiit took large wooden shields from the backs of the Sencherat and made a crude shelter. The Khajiit, even the enormous Sencherat, were able to hide between this shelter and one of the larger trees. When it became apparent that the Khajiit would not leave their shelter, some Bosmer chose to descend and engage the Khajiit sword to claw. When the Bosmer were nearly upon the shelter, one of the Khajiit began playing on a native instrument of plucked metal bars. This was a signal of some kind, and a small group of the man-like Ohms and Ohmsrat emerged from covered holes on the forest floor. Although outnumbered, they were attacking from behind by surprise and won the ground quickly. The Bosmer archers in the trees would have still won the battle were they not having troubles of their own. A group of Dagi and Dagirat, two of the less common forms of Khajiit who live in the trees of the Tenmar forest, jumped from one tree to another under a magical cover of silence. Pardons, please. They took up positions in the higher branches that could not hold a Bosmer's weight. When the signal came, they used their claws and either torches or spells of fire. Accounts from the two survivors I spoke with vary on this point. To distract the archers while the battle on the ground took place, a few of the archers were able to flee, but most were killed. Apparently, the Dagi and Dagirat have more magical ability than is widely believed, if they were able to keep themselves magically silenced for so long. One of the surviving Bosmer told me that he saw a few ordinary cats among the Dagi, and even claimed that these ordinary cats are known as Alfik, and that they were the spellcasters. But Bosmer are almost as unreliable as the Khajiit when it comes to the truth, and I cannot believe that a house cat can cast spells. At the end of the day, the Khajiit lost perhaps a half-dozen fighters, out of a force of no more than 4 dozen, while the Bosmer lost nearly an entire company of archers. The survivors were unable to report back before a second company of archers arrived, and this strategy was repeated again with similar results. Finally, a much larger force was sent, and the Bosmer won that battle with the help of the native animals of Valenwood. That third skirmish and the Khajiiti response I will discuss in the second volume of this series. I will take that, and you'll notice there's a clipping error going on, fairly common, that's keeping us from getting to the bottom shelf. This is the kind of thing I'm comfortable using the console for, because there's a book down here. Brief History of the Empire, V2. Weight 1, Value 2. A Brief History of the Empire, Part 2, by Stronach Cathodge III, Imperial Historian. Volume 1 of this series described in brief the lives of the first 8 emperors of the Septim dynasty, beginning with the glorious Tiber Septim and ending with his great-great-great-great-grandniece Kintyra II. Kintyra's murder in Glenpoint while in captivity is considered by some to be the end of the pure strain of Septim blood in the imperial family. Certainly it marks the end of something significant. Uriel III not only proclaimed himself Emperor of Tamriel, but also Uriel Septim III, taking the eminent surname as a title. In truth, his surname was Mantiarcho from his father's line. In time, Uriel III was deposed and his crimes reviled, but the tradition of taking the name Septim as a title for the Emperor of Tamriel did not die with him. For 6 years, the War of the Red Diamond, which takes its name from the Septim family's famous badge, tore the empire apart. The combatants were the 3 surviving children of Pelagius II, Potema, Sepphoris, and Magnus, and their various offspring. Potema, of course, supported her son Uriel III, and had the combined support of all of Skyrim and northern Morrowind. With the efforts of Sepphoris and Magnus, however, the province of High Rock turned coat. The provinces of Hammerfell, Somerset Isle, Valenwood, Elsewhere, and Blackmarsh were divided in their loyalty, but most kings supported Sepphoris and Magnus. In 3rd Era 127, Uriel III was captured at the Battle of Ichidag in Hammerfell. En route to his trial in the imperial city, a mob overtook his prisoner's carriage and burned him alive within it. His captor and uncle continued on to the imperial city, and by common acclaim was proclaimed Sepphoris I, Emperor of Tamriel. Sepphoris's reign was marked by nothing but war. By all accounts he was a kind and intelligent man, but what Tamriel needed was a great warrior, and he, fortunately, was that. It took an additional 10 years of constant warfare for him to defeat his sister Potema, the so-called Wolf Queen of Solitude, who died in the siege of her city-state in the year 137. Sepphoris survived his sister by only 3 years. He never had time during the war years to marry, so it was his brother, the 4th child of Pelagius II, who assumed the throne. The Emperor Magnus was already elderly when he took up the imperial diadem, and the business of punishing the traitorous kings of the War of the Red Diamond drained much of his remaining strength. Legend accuses Magnus's son and heir Pelagius III of patricide, but that seems highly unlikely, for no other reason than that Pelagius was king of Solitude following the death of Potema, and seldom visited the imperial city. Pelagius III, sometimes called Pelagius the Mad, was proclaimed emperor in the 145th year of the Third Era. Almost from the start his eccentricities of behavior were noted at court. He embarrassed dignitaries, offended his vassal kings, and on one occasion marked the end of an imperial grand ball by attempting to hang himself. His long-suffering wife was finally awarded the regency of Tamriel, and Pelagius III was sent to a series of healing institutions and asylums until his death in Third Era 153 at the age of 34. The Empress Regent of Tamriel was proclaimed Empress Cataria I upon the death of her husband. Some who do not mark the end of the Septim bloodline with the death of Kintyra II consider the ascendancy of this dark elf woman the true mark of its decline. Her defenders, on the other hand, assert that though Cataria was not descended from Tiber, the son she had with Pelagius was, so the imperial chain did continue. Despite racist assertions to the contrary, Cataria's 46-year reign was one of the most celebrated in Tamriel's history. Uncomfortable in the imperial city, Cataria traveled extensively throughout the empire, such as no emperor ever had since Tiber's day. She repaired much of the damage that previous emperors' broken alliances and bungled diplomacy created. The people of Tamriel came to love their empress far more than the nobility did. Cataria's death in a minor skirmish in Blackmarsh is a favorite subject of conspiracy-minded historians. The sage Montelius's discovery, for instance, of a disenfranchised branch of the Septim family, and their involvement with the skirmish, was a revelation indeed. When Cassander assumed the throne upon the death of his mother, he was already middle-aged. Only half-elven, he aged like a Breton. In fact, he had left the rule of Wayrest to his half-brother Uriel due to poor health. Nevertheless, as the only true blood relation of Pelagius, and thus Tiber, he was pressed into accepting the throne. To no one's surprise, the Emperor Cassander's reign did not last long. In 2 years he joined his predecessors in eternal slumber. Uriel Lariat, Cassander's half-brother, and the child of Cataria I and her imperial consort Galavir Lariat after the death of Pelagius III, left the kingdom of Wayrest to reign as Uriel IV. Legally, Uriel IV was a septim. Cassander had adopted him into the royal family when he had become king of Wayrest. Nevertheless, to the council and the people of Tamriel, he was a bastard child of Cataria. Uriel did not possess the dynamism of his mother, and his long 43-year reign was a hotbed of sedition. Uriel IV's story is told in the 3rd volume of this series. Alright, let's turn collision back on. Gonna quick save. Let's see what's over here. Broom, weight 1, value 1. Wooden ladle, weight half a pound, value 1. Alto wine, weight half a pound, value 12. Let's look at what that does. Restore 15 stamina. Stamina regenerates 30% slower for 30 seconds. That's cool. And regular wine, weight half a pound, value 7. Let's see what that does. The exact same thing. Restore 15 stamina. Stamina regenerates 30% slower for 30 seconds. Also note that everyone starts with 100 stamina, which means that everyone starts with 300 carry weight. There's another iron sword on the wall. Tankard, weight half a pound, value 1. Another wooden bowl. Now, Hadvar's going to start moving as soon as I open this chest, so let me go back to the skills menu and talk again about how I'm going to play. So you can break the skills down basically into 4 categories as far as I'm concerned. First, your offensive skills. Skills you can use to kill things. There's a little bit of overlap, but in my mind, the 4 basic offensive skills are destruction, two-handed, one-handed, and archery. Then you have what I'll call your defensive skills. Skills that are about taking damage. These include heavy armor, block, and light armor. Skills that raise when you get hit. Then you have your crafting skills, enchanting, smithing, and alchemy. And finally, I just kind of have a catch-all other category which covers everything else. Basically, as I navigate the game, my goal is to get everything to 100, naturally speaking, in a quasi-natural progression, and reach level 81. I'm going to start with my disfavored skills, the ones I don't want to take perks in. It means I'm going to begin by killing things with two-handed weapons, because I'm taking 0 perks out of that. Similarly, I'm going to start by wearing heavy armor and not blocking attacks, to get that up to 100 as fast as I can. Crafting skills, I'm just going to take breaks after every location I clear, and do a crafting session with all of the materials I've found. For everything else, when I'm done with two-handed, then I'm going to do destruction, then I'm going to do one-handed, and then I'm going to do archery. That'll be my order. And then after heavy armor, I'm going to do block, because I have to focus on blocking attacks to raise it, and then finally light armor because it's nice and mindless. Like I said, crafting, I'll just do sessions for all 3 intermittently every time I clear a location. Now let's look at the other skills. Restoration. This will level pretty naturally. Just at the end of every fight, or during it if I'm in trouble, I'm going to heal myself, and it'll raise naturally that way as the game goes on. Alteration. This one, you kind of have to just decide you're gonna level it. And I like to do that naturally, so once I have the alteration spells, I won't exactly grind them because I'll still be progressing, but like as I move through a dungeon, I'll just constantly spam Mage Light and do that until alteration gets to 100, and it won't take all that long. Enchanting, smithing, or crafting skills I already talked about. Defense and offense, that gets me to sneak. I think I mentioned already, I'm just going to always be in stealth mode from now until sneak hits 100. Lockpicking will raise naturally as I go through dungeons and pick locks, so I don't really need to worry about it. In order to speed it up a little bit, as I have extra lockpicks, I'm going to break them on purpose, just because that speeds things along. Pickpocket will naturally level very quickly. I'm just going to steal everything from everybody, which I'll keep doing after it hits at 100 because I'm a hoarder anyway. So that I don't have to worry about. Speech will level naturally as I sell off loot, especially as I sell off the results of my crafting sessions, so I don't really have to worry about it. It'll go up naturally with time. Crafting. Now illusion. I'm going to skip illusion, do conjuration first. Once I get the requisite spells, I'm going to kind of combine conjuration with two-handed or one-handed or archery, depending on what I'm working on, and just use the bound weapons and kind of naturally progress conjuration that way. If these skills top out and conjuration still has more to go, then I'll start casting summons and just win battles that way, or not win because I'll only have weak summons since I'm not perking conjuration. But but I will use summons to do that. Additionally, this doesn't really require grinding, but with reanimation spells in particular, just as you encounter dead skeevers or wolves or low-level stuff, I just like to reanimate it and punch it 4 times, which turns it hostile and gives you some conjuration experience. And it's not a very painful grind because you keep going. You just do it as you encounter corpses, but it ensures a hefty chunk of conjuration experience as you progress through the game, so I'll be doing that as well. And finally, you come to illusion. Illusion is very easy to level once you get muffle, because muffle you can just cast anywhere, anytime, and illusion goes up, the same way Mage Light does for alteration. However, you have to raise it some before you can afford to cast muffle, so for that I tend to use courage, because you can freely cast it on NPCs in a town without turning them hostile. So as I go about, mill about my crafting sessions in town, I'll be casting Courage on NPCs until I get to the point where I can cast Muffle, and then I'll use that to get Illusion to 100 for the first time. Once we're at level 81, once I have my 0 casting cost gear, and once I have the master spell Harmony, I'll do the only real grind of the game, which is to spam Harmony to get my level from 81 to 252, because you can cast Harmony 3 or 4 times, and Illusion will go from 15 to 100. That obviously isn't going to be relevant for a long, long time, but that's what I'm going to do skill-wise. So let's survey my equipment. All I have is a one-handed sword and some light armor. I would actually prefer to do Destruction before I do one-handed. So I'll arm myself with flames for now, and I'll go ahead and make a more permanent save here. And this has been a pretty long time. I just realized I've been talking for a long, long, long time. So I'll leave it here for now. That'll be my first video, just kind of explaining where everything's going to go and what we're going to do. This has been my side project. Let's play The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. First of many, 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 many videos, as you've no doubt already figured out. Until next time, which is when we will escape from Helgen Keep with our buddy Hadvar, I thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have wonderful days. Bye-bye.